Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching. And the subject of today's video are a little bit strange. These are vegetable goblins from Bequest Miniatures. These are white metal spin cast minis, very old school. So if we're going old school, I dug out from my garage a very old carrier bag from 2007 containing a bunch of old random bases that I've had knocking around for a while. You see there's some Bolt Action Games ones in there, there's whatever, but what I was looking for was slaughter bases. I knew in the back of my head I had some old Games Workshop slaughter bases from the 90s, and these are slaughter based style minis. So I was going to mount them onto the Games Workshop old school square ones, but actually they didn't quite fit. The slotters were slightly too long, and I had these bases which I think are from War Machine Miniatures. I did a lot of War Machine armies a number of years ago. Let's get them mounted on these. Now when you're doing slaughter based minis, you see here what I'm doing is just bending the slaughter base with a pair of pliers, because the actual mini will drop in and out of the base, and you can super glue it in obviously, but just a tip, if you bend the slaughter slightly, it will then grip it into the base, and then you don't have any problems with it sliding out, and the glue can then dry. Whilst I was in that bag, I also found this relic. Now this is a Dark Eldar Splinter Cannon pin from the original release of the Dark Eldar Codex, and I'm gonna say that was 2002. I might be totally wrong on that, but I got that on release day when I was working in the store. Yeah, so there we go. Right, I have mounted the vegetable goblins onto the bases, and now using some Vallejo basing paste just to make the base a little bit interesting. One of the things when you're doing metal minis, you will have to use a file rather than a scraper, and just be careful because you'll get little bits of that metal that you're filing off onto your fingers and stuff. Now, it's not as dangerous as it used to be when they were lead, but just bear that in mind. Clean your hands afterwards, clean your painting table, that kind of thing, so it doesn't all build up. Now this is going to be primarily a contrast paint scheme, but we are starting off here with metallics. Now when I'm doing it, all the paints will be at the top left, and the name of the miniatures that we're doing will be at the bottom left, as hopefully you've seen. So yeah, starting on the metallics, doing the metal on a lot of the miniatures, and moving into that contrast scheme. And what I'm doing here is trying to take whatever the contrast paint is, work it in batches and put it on every single model. So obviously most of the models are carrying something made of wood, so the wild wood stage will go across all the minis. Some of the stages later on though, we're going to do little sort of smaller batches and break the batch of 10 down into a smaller batch. But as you can see, we're going through, we've done all the wood, we're now going on to the snakebite leather, onto the leather accessories, and so on as we go through. Now in terms of painting, why is it white? It's not actually white. I've sprayed it black, and then I've sprayed it with a Wraithbone colour spray, and that is the best way of making the contrast paint kind of work over the top. Now you could do different coloured clothing, different coloured outfits on all the models. I chose a Basilicanum Grey because I wanted a nice muted colour for the kind of shorts, if you want to call them that, the lot of wearing, all the trousers and things, because I think the actual colours of these vegetable goblins themselves are what make them stand out. And you see here, going into the teeth, not all of them got teeth showing, etc., but there's a lot of very similar kind of tones and things going through them all. Now, why did I buy these models? Because really, they're not for gaming. Well, I'm not going to use them for gaming, certainly at least. But they're just a little bit weird and a bit of fun. Now, Bequest Minis, if you check them on Instagram and stuff, do a lot of very cool old school sculpts. And these are incredibly old school, even though they're a little bit weird. Now, I'm working on here the plasters, so literally just a bone colour. And they've got plasters all over them from their injuries across the models. Some very weird little quirks onto some of these. I think they are fantastic. But yeah, they normally do, or what I've normally bought from them is a range of the sort of Space Marines that they do, very cool old Hammer Space Marines. You'll be able to check them out on the channel. But they dropped these on a Kickstarter, and I just thought that is hilarious. They're just fantastically fun models. No reason for me to buy them and collect them. I'm not going to use them in any kind of gaming. Well, I'll never know. There might be a game in the future that I need some goblins that look like vegetables. But really just for a bit of fun. And I think Warhammer and well, wargaming in general should just be that at times, just for fun. You know, you don't need to be buying this unit because it's the next big thing in your tournament force or whatever. Occasionally, it's not a bad thing to step away and just do something for a bit of fun, and that is very much what these guys are. Now, I've stepped away from actually describing the painting. Hopefully you've watched along and saw what paints I was putting on there. No rocket science in this paint scheme whatsoever. It is literally taking the contrast paint, putting it on the area of the model that it applies to that. So when you see me put in, you know, say the bone colour on, it goes on all the models. When you see me putting the trouser colour on, it goes across all the models. And here I've dropped the stage in about just doing the base in the brown and then edging the base in this Abaddon black. So that's all 10 models that you've seen, and you'll have seen the names for all 10 models. I'm not going to put the names of the models back on now, but I will go through the paints. Now, stage 1 And I'm going through this with, you see the 3 models here. So now we're breaking it down into smaller batches. So that really is a speed thing. So the first 10 models, you did every single model got the black on it, or every single model got the bone. And now we're breaking it small batches based on the colour I'm going to do the skin. So the first part here, the orc flesh you've seen, this is going to be done on the arms and the legs. So this, because they're goblins, and the idea is that this would be the colour they would all be if they were normal orcs or goblins. So we're going to do that. Now the reason we're not doing this on all 10 models is I don't want this orc flesh to dry. So I'm working on each individual model at this point, but with the 4 paints. So you can see here, putting the orc flesh onto the arms. We're doing the mantis warrior's green across the body, if that's what you call a cabbage, doing that across the body there. And then when it's still dry, we're blending it in to the arms, and we're going around the mouth here, taking this Gulliman flesh onto the mouth area. And again, what these paints will do is slightly merge into each other to blend the colours together nicely. And that's why we're doing it now, model by model, but in little batches. In this case, batch of 3 to use these 4 colours, and then a larger batch later on. You can see the Grey Minotaur green is really for the top, so I didn't use that at all on the cabbage one, but this is going on to the broccoli one because this is the other green that we're putting on his hair, is that what you call it, whatever we're going to say. Very odd talking about these models. And again on the kind of pea pod type character there, so using a darker green onto what would be the hair, but it's actually the part of the pea pod, and the bright green onto the body. So that's the 3 models that we're painting in those colours. Now I've moved on, and this is a batch of 2, taking a shyish purple onto the body of the aubergine character, and the others. It's so hard to describe these models, but as you've seen, they are rammed full of character. Now this colour I think actually ended up being a little bit too dark for the models, but again I wanted a darker kind of purpley colour for these. Now I'm quite happy with how they kind of turned out in the end, but I would, if I was doing it again, I would probably water this shyish purple down. And if you don't know how to water down contrast paints, you will see that later on when we do the carrot colours. But I think this has gone a little bit too dark. Still quite like it, still works out quite nicely, but again experimenting as we kind of go through. Now again onto that's the next one. Now you could have painted this in the shyish purple. You can see here I'm doing the pulling in that green we talked about from earlier, just for the sort of leaves at the top of his head. And then we're using Majos purple for the actual body. Now, maybe this is probably too light to do the aubergine colour in it, but it's probably about right for what we're going for here onto the body. So, and again, this is just a batch of 1. But you can see the core paints that I'm using in the 2 is that orc flesh, the Gulliman flesh for the kind of around the lip area. That's fine. Now this in some ways is one of my favourites. So you'd never get to use this kind of real vibrant colour very often, well, unless you're painting Imperial Fist Marines or something. So yeah, but dropping that across the model, and it really does pop. It really does. I think some of these models are fantastic. I think the sweet corn sculpting I think on here is amazing. A nice bright red as we move on to the tomato character. And again, a single batch of 1, but you'll see in the background there, hopefully on the desk, the sort of core colours, the orc flesh, the Gulliman flesh, and then bouncing between using the mantis warrior's green and the Minotaur green, depending on how we're going to do the hair or the accessories on top of the head there. Now, when I talked about watering down contrast paints before, this is how you would do it. Now, in this case, I wanted to do an orange colour for the carrot and the pepper, but I don't have an orange-based contrast paint. Now, as much as I like buying things for no real reason, or for very minimal reasons, I didn't really want to go and buy a contrast paint just to use it on 2 incredibly small models. I don't really foresee myself needing an orange contrast paint in the future, but I do have contrast medium, which is what this is here. So you take a bit of the normal paint you're using. In this case, it was a bright orange, just a Vallejo paint, and if I have 50-50 mixed it with that contrast medium, and then basically it's never quite as good as the official pre-mixed contrast paints, but it's fairly close. So I've mixed those 2 things together and then contrast mediumed it on there. Now, if you were going to do this paint scheme and you wanted to do it in a contrast style and you don't have any contrast paints, that's kind of how you could do it and mix all your own paints together. It's not often how I would do it. I don't often make my own little contrast paints, but it is a way you could do it. And I do find that these models really, really fit the contrast paint scheme. So then we're basically done. A real fast, super quick scheme. I'm banging a wash layer of Games Workshop Seraphim Sepia over the top. That kind of dulls it down, pulls the colours together and does that. And after that wash has dried, spray of varnish just to matte it down again, and there's the models done. Look, a little bit of fun, a bit of a daft paint scheme for no reason other than I loved the models and I thought the idea was just hilarious. These are going to sit in the cabinet and do nothing apart from look funny and cool. So those are the 10 models. I think really enjoyed doing them. I do think a little bit too dark on the aubergine type colours, and my favourites in these, I think probably is the pepper. A really angry pepper with his bright orange face looking mad. Yeah, so it's a bit of fun. Hope you enjoyed that. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in another video.